Follow me for 1 second. John the Baptist, Jesus, Judas, Ashmole, Blake, Crowley. The first three, legendary figures. The latter, actual figures. All these individuals mark history in their own way. The legends that we are educated with, the way that our society functions and so on. Why have you chosen these characters and told their stories? And what is the common thread between the human and historical side of all the above?
Well, I don't understand the second question, but we'll get on to that. The first question is, was it, what do they have in common? Was this something?
Why have you chosen this character, this sixth character, to tell their story?
Well, this really is like your first question where you said, did you choose it or did it choose me? This one is much easier. They chose me. I think Elias Ashmole wanted me to write his biography, and I think Crowley wanted me to. And John the Baptist could really do with a good biographer, and he never had one. Jesus, well, the only person who can tell you his life is himself, but he's not available for interview. So I didn't write his biography, so I couldn't get hold of enough authentic material for that one. I wouldn't mind doing St. Paul one of these days. A friend of mine said, you must do Paul. I said, the John the Baptist book gives you my view of Paul, if you read. And who else? Blake, of course. Well, Blake is just my old brother, you know. He's just somebody that I'm very familiar with him, and I feel he's like a brother insofar as I like him, and I also want to thump him. You know, he annoys me a lot. He made all the mistakes that I've made, and at a time when he couldn't ever recover from those mistakes, I've been able to recover from some of my mistakes. These were inevitable people to write about for me because they were all maverick individualists with a strongly peculiar worldview, which, if you understand it, is incredibly clear. These people, their problem is they see too clearly the way things are. But it is the world's blindness that they cannot see what radiant souls these are. I, out of, you could say, chivalrous intent, if you like, want the world to see these people and be reminded of what it. So many things are written about William Blake by the art world that are just tosh, absolute tosh. They have not engaged with Blake because they're frightened of what they call the esoteric. I think that William Blake, Elias Ashmole, Aleister Crowley, Jesus, etc., are just fantastic beings who give us an insight, if we want to, that make us feel better about being freaks in the universe. You know, mankind is a total freak in this dreadful universe, methane-smelling dump that we've been landed in. I used to think when I was a boy, I used to look up at the stars. I'd be overwhelmed by the grandeur and would want to write the Ninth Symphony again.
Jesus, John, Jesus, Judas, Ashmole, Blake, Crowley, are they just a human expression of the same soul that came back into our history across time?
I think in a way, yes, there is only, you know, in this, as nature is a continuum, truth is universal. So if you are inspired by the truth, it's the same truth. That's why we find them intelligible. I can understand Blake. I can understand spiritual figures of late antiquity. They don't speak to me in a foreign language. They speak to me in the language of truth. And I'm sure it's comprehensible from Peking, or Beijing, as we are now informed we call it, from Beijing to San Francisco. Truth is truth, and love is love, and the universal qualities are absolutely international. They're not distributed equably around the world, these qualities, or the ability to access them, or the ability to direct them. You can be aware of the principle of truth, but you may find certain developments of that truth in a particular area you can't relate to. But yes, it is one thing coming through those men. Absolutely, one spirit. They would know each other. I think that's the invisible church. Is simply people who know. They only have to look in the eye and they know who they're dealing with. You know you're a part of the fraternity, and you don't need to wear a badge. You don't, and that's why you're invisible. The world doesn't see you. That's the invisible college. It's got nothing to do with secrecy. The world isn't interested in seeing the people who really count. They don't want to see. The world wears dark glasses. We could be open to the world with our, hey, and you'll just be ignored.
Yeah.
That was what Andrei, the founder of the Rosicrucian movement, which was such an influence, was saying. The invisible church, the world is simply invisible because the world is blind. So I don't think any of those men were saying anything different to one another.
Now, can I challenge you there? Is that because the world is blind or the world doesn't want to see? It's easier not to see, like there is no worse death than the one that doesn't want to listen. So is there a conscious choice that every time you are asked to think...
If you're blind, you don't want to see.
No.
Spiritually blind, I'm talking about.
Yeah.
It's their not wanting that makes them blind. So you can't really separate those two ideas.
No, I understand.
Blindness is simply an inability to accept the light. Now, I'm blind in one of my eyes, and the thing I hate about it, because it's happened after a disease, I won't go into details, but I'm aware now that I'm not putting any light in through this side of my
right eye.
Even when I couldn't see very well, the light was coming through, and it's since the vision is darkened, I feel I've really lost something. Now that's something that's been done to me as part of an operation, but I think spiritually it's what people do to themselves.
Yeah. Tobias, I go back to our 6 characters. How much studying those characters has decoded who Tobias Churton is?
Well, yeah, you know that. I think you know the answer.
I'd love to listen.
Instead of writing an autobiography, I wrote about those people. You could put it that way. I'm very reluctant to. It may seem not that way from this particular interview, but it's the way you put the questions. I feel very uncomfortable blowing my own trumpet, or doing anything directly autobiographical. Obviously, as you get older, you feel you want to leave. You'd like to put your memories, because you've seen a lot. You want to put them in. But up until roughly about now, it suited me to write about John Lennon. You forgot him.
I forgot that. It's true. You're right. Sorry.
It suited me to talk about the mystery of my own being through the mirror of that mystery in their lives, because I've recognized something in these people that I strongly share or identify with. And I will call it broadly a Gnostic experience. I don't want to get too academic about what we mean by Gnostic. I'd say it's spirit. We're talking about a spiritual knowledge. But also what I like about all of them is that they have taken a position on the world. They haven't retired into academe. They haven't hidden behind professorships. They haven't located themselves in political parties and been able to hide themselves that way. They've somehow stood out even when they didn't want to. I strongly identify with these maverick spirits. And my mother always said, Toby, you hear a different drum. And that's probably... But nobody wanted to talk about Toby Churton when I was young, because I was just Churton, When I was at school for 7 years at the state school, it was Churton this and Churton that. And everything you did was criticised, And in the ordinary English society, there's no respect for what I do ordinarily. So rather than talk about me and try, I get people to look at these people. But yes, it's not like I thought I want to write about myself, so I write about Blake. It's just because you're really writing about the same insights in these people, a family of insights, which I share. What are all these people saying? What's the message? The message is what Pico della Mirandola was saying. I would like to include him in my list. Pico was one of the greats, in my view, the absolute greats. He wrote the Oratio de Dignitatis Homini, and he wanted to deliver it to all the learned in Florence in 1486, and the Pope stopped him. And you read this oration on the dignity of man. It's like the manifesto of every idealist movement of man there's ever been. It's incredible. It's hermetic, and if the Masons understood their own soul, they'd recognize it was a manifesto for a true Masonry. Pico, very important, the long-haired philosopher, died when probably poisoned.
Originally this question was about Freemasonry, but allow me to take off the word Freemasonry from this question for a moment. You're an observer, you studied history, you studied characters, you studied society, you studied how mystical, esoteric, science have helped us to become who we are. And yet, at every generation, there is a breaking moment where being technology, being money, being science, there is a sort of break from the tradition. Now, I believe that COVID-19 has created this rupture moment, and this is mainly due to a couple of moment in time. Technology is getting to a level of perfection that is quite remarkable, and people are accepting it. You have the elderly generation that is usually the one that stops from adopting change because they need more time to process it and so on. But COVID-19 changed everything. Everybody's on a Zoom call, everybody's on social media, everybody's using technology means to exchange. How do you see this moment changing the next generation, the next 10, 20 years? How are we going to be impacted by this moment?
Well, I think we're wounded by it. It would be nice. It would be nice to think that this is the great wake-up call. Now we'll see. Now eyes will be open. I think there will be groups who will use it as a propaganda thing. This is, brought the world together, but of course it hasn't. It's shown how divided the world is. I'm not a great technophile, so I don't think social media as we currently have it is anything more than a reflection of the rubbish that's going on in people's minds, generally speaking. I'd much rather meet a person face to face, because our bodies are the way to receive the presence of a person is through the sensory equipment that we've been given. This means only conveys a certain amount. It's very good. It's fabulous technology and everything. But anyway, it was advancing very fast anyway. In a way, it's almost a coincidence that we were very quick to rely. You see, I would ponder the question: if we had not had social media, mobile phones, and all of that, would we have been so quick to do as the government told us and retire to our entertainment centres at home? That to me is a retrograde movement. I really believe isolating people in their homes in a state of fear, manipulated by the government, is a tremendously pernicious state of affairs. And unfortunately, nobody had sufficient knowledge to know the best way to deal with this problem. Will it be a wake-up moment? Well, it might be a judgment from God. It might be. It's very strange. Just before the COVID thing started to operate, our house was flooded, which was a horrible experience. And I was writing at the time about the Pillars of Enoch, as they're called, or Seth's Pillars, which Josephus wrote about in his History of the Jews, that said when God decided to destroy mankind either by water or by fire, the children of Seth and his progeny, rather, his descendants, put up 2 pillars with all the knowledge of astronomy on them, one that would withstand fire, one that would withstand water, in the hope that whichever way God chose to destroy the world, somebody sometime would know they'd done something. I was writing that, and we were flooded, which was terrifying. We were flooded out of our house. We were suddenly homeless, and it was a terrible experience for us. And the weird thing was that the night before it happened during the night, I said to Joanna, I feel a terrible darkness coming on, a foreboding, and I feel like God is about to judge us. And 2 hours later, we were trying to escape from the house, and then the first thing, we tried to get people to come and work in the house, and COVID. It wouldn't work in the house because COVID, so we had the flood and COVID. So for me, the whole thing was tremendously apocalyptic. And I do wonder if it isn't a sort of judgment, but it seems to be a judgment we brought on ourselves. I've been saying for people for a long time that all this travel, thousands and thousands and thousands of people traveling around in airplanes from one part of the world to another, is just an pandemic waiting to happen. And we've had plenty of pandemics before, and it's nothing unusual. It usually comes about because of some of human beings' filthy habits, getting too close to the animals, lack of cleanliness. Do I think it'll be a game changer for the spiritual awakening of the world? No, I honestly don't. I think that's going on anyway. I think those who are onto that level will obviously see this event in a different way. They will see it as a sign of the state of the world. These things are always a sign of the state of the world. The trouble is every generation thinks it's the last. Or the first. The young people think they're the first. They just discovered sex. No one. The old generation fear that they're the last. And this is reproduced historically all the time, and it's inescapable. It's just part of being here. Apocalyptic is a mentality which we keep going for some reason. It explains things very quickly. I think man is always spiritual. He doesn't cease to be spiritual just because he's not aware of it. So, no, I don't see this as a great moment. But as I say, there'll be plenty of people who will, and who will say it's a call to action. But I think most people, when they get there, something real like ordinary life, won't even want to talk about it. And I think it'll be like the men who came back from the First World War, who never describe their experience to their children or grandchildren. My grandfather he was a medic in Burma when the Japanese invaded in 1942. And he was there for the whole war period. He was at the Battle of Imphal and Kohima. He played an incredible role in one of the most desperate parts of the Second World War, right up to 1945, because the Japanese didn't surrender till August. And he would never talk about it. He wasn't even interested in talking about it, but he liked to read about it. He read the history books, but he didn't want to talk about it. Now, that's pretty extreme, and I think that's true of a lot of people who've had real experience of catastrophe and chaos and death. And my guess is that we won't want to talk too much about it. We want to get on with other things. Now, it may dispose us to have more fun. I think it's time we had some fun, and I don't just mean Friday night paying a lot of money at a pub in London or something. that sort of. I think we want a more funny. I think we want a more easy life. I think we want more pleasure. I think this will be a big thing. I see this. It'll be a moment for obviously home entertainment has had a big plus from this. So there's going to be a lot of money to be made.
Yes.
And people will get the pleasure of living. So I think the biggest thing will be pleasure of living. Now, can we include in this pleasure of living a little bit of time to think spiritual? You know, they only used to ask you to go to church for an hour a week.
Yeah.
And yet people will do 3 hours of yoga, which is... I'm not saying we should go to church, but I would like to think that people might start reading some more worthwhile books occasionally. Yeah. I think most people want to imagine that everything's going to be great anyway. People are very, very tired. I remember my mother used to speak about the tiredness of England, the fatigue after the war, which went on for years. The sort of just feeling of, no, we don't want, not more news.
Yeah.
Not more news. I think normal will become a very, very profitable business. You know, I'll be the professor of normal. I think you'll get a degree in normalcy. I want to throw in Freud and say, who said normalcy is neurosis.
It might be a business opportunity. Who knows?
It's been a media event for many people, this, and for other people it's been just a wretched inconvenience.
Yes, it is.
But the one thing I think, the real triumph of this is science.
I find it a fascinating journey. What you took me through, it's brilliant. I have 2 short questions.
Right.
And then we close.
Okay.
Unfortunately for me, because I will keep on going anyhow. First, you partially answered me already at the beginning of our conversation. As an author, as an artist, what are you looking as your next project? You spoke about the documentary. Are you working on a book? Are you working on a new composition?
Yeah, all of the above. All of them. I've got 2 books. I've got 2 books to come out still. One that I've just finished the editing of, which will come out at the end of the year, which is called Aleister Crowley in England. And I had loads of ideas for my book after that, and the publisher wanted another Crowley book, which everyone will think, Churton can only write about Crowley. But I was asked by some Freemasons in Paris, couldn't you do Crowley in Paris? No one's ever done it. I said, no one's ever done that. That's interesting. Yeah. Because he spent a huge amount of time in Paris. So I'm doing that. But of course, I will get nothing for this but ridicule. Let's just say, Churton can only write about Crowley. But I always thought Crowley deserved a multi-volume biography, not a 1-volume. I read Martin Gilbert's Life of Churchill in the 90s, and that was 7 volumes. 7 fat volumes.
Wow.
Churchill's worth 7. I do think Crowley's worth 5. I love Churchill. It's always good to read about.
Yeah.
A man of great spirit and tremendous faith. Not a conventional religious faith at all. I think from an evangelical's point of view, he was probably an atheist. But he had something.
Yeah.
He had something. And of course the Freemason, as it turned out.
Exactly.
But, I think so. That's for starters. I'll be recording a new album in September, and I've just written 2 series of a big costume drama set in the 19th century.
Wow.
Which is a mass entertainment conception, but a very enlightened one, I would say. So its chances of getting made, who knows? But,
last question. Who is inspiring today Tobias Churton?
Well, it ain't the government. God is the answer to that.
God.
And my wife.
I truly enjoyed it, Tobias. And trust me, there are so many questions that I have. It will be probably, if I'm lucky enough, we will do it together next time with a beer and enjoy the time together.